What have you been up to today?
Today, I'm launching a new study,
Yep.
which is to promote physical activity in older adults. And so I, started chatting to sending out emails to some community groups like U3A to see if they're interested in my study I'm about to launch.
What have you finished your PhD?
Yes, yeah.
You have, yeah.
Yeah.
I said something that I was like, I think I said, yeah, Stephanie's a PhD student. Michaela's like, no, she's finished it. She's a doctor now, right?
Yes,
that's it.
yeah.
Like, I was like, oh, cool. How did I not know that? I should know that.
Yeah.
Very cool. So what have you got your PhD in?
My PhD was in using new technology to promote physical activity. So using websites and Fitbit trackers and things like that to help promote physical activity in the general population. We know that things like face-to-face counselling support helps people to change their behaviour and integrate physical activity in their lives, but it's expensive and the government doesn't want to pay for that. So we look at digital options where we can create content that people can go to that gives them tailored evidence-based information to help them to change their behaviour and in a way that we can scale up at low cost.
Does it work?
Good question. That's what we try to find out. And for the most part, yes. With research, we often look at averages and we find out for most participants, on average, it helps people to increase their physical activity behaviour. But the challenge is helping them to sustain that in the long term. And, which doesn't always happen. And it doesn't always work for every person as well. Some people might benefit greatly and others not at all.
What are the areas of health that you focused on, and did you find that like weight loss worked well in these programs, but like preventing chronic disease didn't? Or like what would be were there particular areas that worked really well in targeting them?
We focus on our main outcome is just increasing physical activity because we know that improves health. Physical activity is a pretty bad way of losing weight, really. I mean, it's you're going to have to do a lot of activity to lose weight. It's much easier. Well, it's still not easy, but it's often a easier option is through diet to lose weight. So we try to steer away from weight loss. Also, people who try to increase their activity to lose weight often stop early because they don't see any weight changes, and then they stop changing their behaviour and go back to sedentary lifestyles. So we try to focus on health outcomes, in particular short-term health outcomes like improving mental health and things like that, which helps motivate people to keep changing their behaviour. But it's difficult to measure things like health. We don't go and do a blood test and measure their HbA1 levels, which is an indicator for diabetes, or to that level. We just focus on increasing activity, knowing that will improve their health.
It's a pretty good indicator.
Yeah.
Cool. So my old gym buddies were right when they said abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym.
Yeah.
Is that
I mean, physical activity plays a part and it's important for our overall health, but it's just not an efficient way of losing weight. Because you can use those online calculators to work out, if I eat this donut, how many hours of activity do I need to do? And it's crazy.
It's depressing.
Yeah. And it's a bit more complicated than that, but it just gives you an idea.
Is BMI a good indicator of health?
No, BMI is terrible. And all researchers know that, but we don't have a better tool when we're doing a lot of our research. It's online and we rely on people to fill out a survey to get information from them. It's one of the only tools that we can use to indicate weight. So we use it, but we all know that it's a bit dodgy.
I think I'm overweight according to my almost obese according to my BMI.
Yeah.
But I think genetically, I haven't had this tested myself, but I believe one of my parents had a test done at some point. There's like crazy high bone density.
Yes.
So is that, the thing of like, I've just got heavy bones. I think my doctor said it's true. It
could be part of it, and just muscle mass. With more muscle mass can
it wouldn't
make
be
your
that
BMI appear a lot bigger.
It wouldn't be muscle mass on me, but
Yeah,
maybe on some people.
Yeah, like footballers, sometimes you see elite athlete footballers have a BMI of obese, but
Interesting.
They're healthier than a lot of the population.
What elements, I mean, what elements of your work do you really enjoy? Because obviously it's a broad, research is such a broad spectrum of,
Yes.
what you can do in that space.
I get excited about contributing to knowledge. So I really, and creating and inventing things to improve health and therefore quality of life in the general population. So research is a slow process. So it's hard to see like major impacts in the community from one study, but by contributing my research and finding out more about how we can increase physical activity in the population, I feel does add to the general evidence that then leads to change policy in at the government level or deliver programs that are going to help people to lead healthier lifestyles, reduce chronic illness and improve the quality of life and reduce burden on the healthcare system as well. So I get excited by that concept of contributing to that and being able to have the space to just dream, I guess or create and come up with ideas as well. The research is often at the forefront of testing new ideas to see if they work, and so I like that part of it. Although sometimes industry is better well funded to lead some in physical activity promotion. There's a lot of industry led like applications and things that are great, but even with those, we still need research to evaluate them to see if they actually work. So I like being involved in that.
I'd love to talk about industry funding studies a little bit later
Yeah.
on, but I think there's probably I'd love to just know a bit more about, I guess, your journey to get here.
Yep.
Where were you born? Where did you go to school? What did you? I think I said it right. School. You're from Melbourne, right?
Yes.
School. Paul.
Yeah, school. Yep.
School.
No, I think it's more South Australia that's at the school.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, tell me a bit about
story.
you. Yeah, your life story in 2.5 minutes.
Yep, sure. I grew up in Melbourne. I went to a co-ed school and then moved schools to go to a all-girls school in year 10, 11, 12. And around that time, I decided I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and I loved psychology and I wanted to counsel people. So I then studied psychology at university and really wanted to get into my master's, which was a 2-year course that you add to the psychology course to become a clinical psychologist. But at that time, I was 23 and living at home with my parents, and I applied for the program. I didn't get in and I was devastated. But at the same time, I got offered a job working at the Cancer Council doing research in behaviour change and psychology around health, looking at increasing participation in cancer screening programs and improving healthy diets and active lifestyles and things like that. So I took that job and I just loved it. And I loved how I always wanted to help people. And I think that's why I wanted to be a psychologist. But I was surprised by how much you were able to help people through research. And we actually were able to collect data on like programs to promote cancer screening, like bowel cancer screening, I was working on, and we could see how like our research then, like we worked out what helped people to actually follow the cancer screening guidelines. And then there was the Cancer Council then, based on that research, made changes and increased participation in the bowel cancer screening programs, and which then detects cancer and saves lives. So I then decided I wanted to focus on research and do clinical psychology maybe one day down the track. But I sort of fell into research in a way. I didn't choose it right from the start.
Is that what all people say who get into research? I didn't want to be a researcher, but I kind of fell into it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. A lot of people, like some people that I sometimes work with or have a few PhD students that were health professionals, and then they got fed up with not having enough information to base clinical decisions off, or fed up with bad systems or processes that they wanted to improve. So then they went back to do their PhD to research an area that they were passionate about. But some other people start degrees and just don't finish. They just keep going to do their PhD. So I guess you'd say they fell into it.
Yeah, I feel like I hear that from I did some work with the Appleton Institute,
Yes.
who's ironically shares the same last name as me. It's great.
Yeah. I'm part of the Appleton Institute.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So that's based in South Australia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there was a bunch of PhD students in that workshop and whatever, and it was great. But it was funny because some of the PhD the people who were there sort of doing the workshop had said similar things that. I hated my bachelor. I hated studying during my bachelor, but then kind of just broken through into this thing. And I think passion, finding aligning maybe what you were doing with some sort of passion, and then seeing the results of that might have contributed to them actually starting to enjoy that.
Yeah.
I guess we hate study because that's what we did in school, and that's what you have to do. Or I don't know. I mean, I just feel like there's a bit of a lot of people study just to get the job that they want at the end.
Yep. Yeah.
And don't always enjoy that process.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I don't know. It's an interesting one. Yeah. You could break down the psychology of that, but
maybe another day. Yeah.
How did you end up here in Rockhampton?
Well, when I was working at the Cancer Council, I met this guy online called Steve, who's now my husband, and
he's a pilot.
He's a pilot. Yeah, he lived in this place called Rockhampton, which I'd heard of, but I didn't know where it was. So I had to Google where is Rockhampton, and that looks like a nice place. There's a few plastic cows and like the beach not far. And he was visiting his grandparents at the time in Newcastle and came to visit me in Melbourne just after we met online, and we hit it off. And then I decided to come visit him in Rockhampton. I was never thinking I'm going to meet someone in Rocky and move there. It just sort of happened. And I decided around that time I was thinking of pursuing a career in research, and started applying for PhD programs at CQ University based in Rockhampton. And so I got into a PhD program here and moved up here, and then married Steve a year later.
So cool.
Yeah.
That's the short version?
Yep. Well, yeah.
I'm sure there's a lot more to it than that. And now you've been married for
10 years.
10 years
yes,
and have a couple of kids?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Imogen, who's 5, and Aiden, who's 2. Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
And do you like being a mum?
Yes. Yeah, I do. It's changes your perspective on life and work and career and lots of things.
How has it changed your perspective?
I think a lot of it. I mean, there's in different ways. It increases my desire to like improve the world and want to contribute to society, because I want the world to be a better place for my kids and other people's kids and the next generations. But it also, so it's partly my motivation for my job, but then it also helps me put career in perspective, that it's not everything. I want to make sure I'm contributing and do valuable work, but I don't necessarily have to be some award-winning researcher at the that becomes a professor in 5 years or anything like that. And the balance is okay, because family is important. So in that sense, it changed my perspective as well.
Cool. Do you think some of your friends who live in a more densely populated place like Melbourne have a slightly different view on that to you? Like, it could be, people who live in more densely populated areas seem to just see the world slightly differently.
Yeah, well, I didn't expect it, but when I moved from Melbourne to Rockhampton, there was definitely a bit of a culture shock. But in terms of work, yeah, I mean, I guess when I was in Melbourne, I remember everybody would ask me when they first meet, "What do you do?" And that's how that defines you, like what your career is and what your job is defines you. I often felt that was the first thing that came up in any conversation, whereas at least around the time when I moved to Rockhampton, it didn't seem to be as much the case. It was less of a focus on career, and I don't know why that is. It's just different culture. Everyone's a bit more chill in Rockhampton, but a lot of people have really successful careers and have an impact through live in regional communities, particularly nowadays that a lot of work can be online and work remotely as well.
Did the focus on the digital programs that you've been working on for a lot of years,
Yep.
with the pandemic, did that give, how did that change your work? Was it cool because you were able to, you're already in a digital mindset in terms of rolling out health programs in a digital set? Like,
absolutely. It was easy to transition from, like, when the pandemic came, we're already running digital programs, and it kind of highlighted the importance of our programs. It means that it's a bit easier to get funding, research funding from competitive research funding schemes, because people realise the importance of digital delivery. Just originally, it was mainly just because it was easy to scale up to more people, but also then it's a way of helping people to increase their activity through problems like the pandemic, where people can't get to face-to-face classes or other activity options like that.
Interesting. I always wonder how that affects the things that people were working on or whatever. And
I think I was talking to another researcher who was running a yoga trial for older adults to improve their balance, and then COVID happened, so they just moved it all online. But it ended up making the study cooler because they had all this data about how older adults' perceptions of following like yoga instructions online, those that had never done anything like that before, and found that it actually worked. And a lot of them even liked it better because it was less of a hassle to get to a class or have people watching them in a class. Like, it was all on Zoom, and it had benefits that they wouldn't have imagined. They would have thought, older adults' digital programs wouldn't work, but it did work very well. So it kind of forced some research studies that we didn't plan. Yeah,
that's really cool. So where did we leave off with research? Industry funding studies. Yeah. How does that work in terms of, we hear things all the time about the studies showed this, and then the studies showed this, and sometimes that can be competing things.
Yes.
So what's the process? Either you can talk about the stuff you've worked on in how it went from, concept stage to, trials, and then, moving through to what's the end result for that in terms of that becomes a journal article, or when does that get taught in universities and all that sort of thing. I guess, I'm really interested in that whole process, but then also the competing ideas of like how studies can show things, competing ideas. And then you said earlier, sometimes it can be good that industry funds things, but we've seen that they get the results they want.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I'll start with industry funding. We're seeing like less and less like research funding, and more of a push from funding agencies like the Australian government to fund researchers that also bring in industry funding, so they don't have to pay for the whole study. The industry is adding to it as well, and then that's a way of stretching government research funds further. And in a lot of cases, that's a good thing. It sort of requires it forces collaboration with industry to solve world problems. Some other researchers at the Appleton Institute, which you mentioned, are doing some great work with industry on improving our understanding of health and shift work, and also improving alertness on night shifts, which has a big impact on safety in mining, and also in the healthcare sector. Safety not only for the workers themselves in driving to the shift or home from shift, but also in their delivery of healthcare to patients in those night shifts. And so industry, a lot of say mining companies are giving funding for those studies, and that doesn't really doesn't affect the results. Like, you have to claim that we've got industry funding when you're publishing the research, so everybody's aware. But that is a way that industry has like a shared or common goal with the researchers and the government, that they can all work together to improve our understanding of health and shift work, and use that information to improve policies and practices in the workplace and at the government level. So there is some positive ways that industry can help answer problems and through research. But then that becomes a problem with industry when they have a vested interest. So might be like a drug, this has happened for years, like drug companies will fund their own research, and because there's like such strict practices in registering like a drug, that they need to have all their documents available. It makes it pretty hard to do anything like dodgy in that. But then that extends to other programs. Like there might be in our area of research, an online health program that industry has built, and they want researchers to evaluate it. Well, then the researchers then have pressure to kind of find the positive results, which can then affect, you can sort of pick data that might, be more favourable for that, to show that intervention is effective. And there's even been cases where industry have said, well, you can't publish the results in the contract. Like, we'll pay for you, the researchers, to do this study, but you can't publish the results if it's a negative finding as well. So that messes with your research information that we know if we only publish positive results about these types of interventions. And although I'm talking about general public health interventions, so it's probably not unlikely to cause harm, but then to participants, if you just say trying to promote physical activity, if it doesn't work, you're probably not causing harm, but it's still, industry can negatively impact results that way. There's processes in research where you're supposed to register your trial before you do it. So you say, this is going to be my main outcome. I'm looking at physical activity, and we're going to see if physical activity improves, like measured through a watch through before the intervention to after the intervention, and then a year later. And that's what we're looking at. And because that's already out there online where people can find it in a trial registry, or they publish a protocol paper, it's called, where you put out your plan, it's trying to stop that, where researchers or industry can try to find the positive results, because you've already published what your main outcomes will be and you have to report on those, and it makes it difficult to you can't then publish on a different outcome that's more favourable.
Yeah.
So there is processes, but
I guess it's hard for the everyday man or woman to then know what the truth of those outcomes are.
Yeah.
I've found myself wanting to learn about something, so I'll go read about it, and you kind of get lost in this world of, you got to subscribe to this thing to read the journal article anyway, and you got to pay to access these things, or there's a lot of information online, but then it's interesting, like, without putting on our tinfoil hats, sometimes you're just shown the things that want to be shown to you.
Yes.
And so then we've got this, everyday people who, to go back a step, if that's happening in your area of research, it's probably happening in lots of areas of research. And mattress companies have been doing this for years, and award-winning mattress. And it's like you look at the award, and it's a company that's owned by them.
Yes.
So
that is a good example. There's no evidence basically that mattresses improve back pain or help with back pain at all. But the mattress companies will tell you otherwise. Yeah.
Or we could become an award-winning whatever we want to be by setting up an organization, having a charter, and then based on the criteria awarding our company, the best whatever our product is.
Yeah.
And so we can then claim we're an award-winning company in this area, but it kind of, now obviously that's a very shallow version of that. Research is a lot more depth to the things that are happening, but it's hard for the everyday person to understand what the truth is. This study proves that you should have Milo cereal for your breakfast, and it's a great start to your day. And it's got a whatever health star rating.
Yes.
But is that the best thing? Like, how do we know? Because, and how do we know something is the truth, the claims that are in it, or how do we know if they're, skewed by something?
Yeah, absolutely. And the process, like the research process, is slow, which I think I mentioned earlier. Like it takes a long time to make a decision, or even like a well-educated guess about something, because you need multiple research studies done without bias, so not too much like industry's funding that has like a vested interest, and done in multiple research groups that have slightly different methods in different countries to then build up the evidence base. And then we do things called systematic reviews or meta-analyses, where a researcher will come and screen all the published research on a particular topic. And you'll find studies that will find Milo is good, and some studies will say Milo cereal is bad, and then they'll put it together, or like collate all the data together, and then find a final outcome over those 20 or 30 or 40 studies, which then we have a bit of a better idea. But often there's biases within those studies that sometimes trials aren't well funded enough, so there's not enough participants, and a meta-analysis or a systematic review like that can help those problems by combining all the studies. So instead of 200 participants here and 100 there, you've got 12,000 in a meta-analysis, and a better evidence, but it's still not perfect. And then you keep doing that for more years of research, and then do another meta-analysis with even more. So it's a slow process. And I think what happens is the individual will see the news and say, oh, research study found this. Milo cereal is bad because it has lots of sugar, which is probably the truth. But then we all jump and say, well, now they're telling us that it's bad, but before they said it was good. But it's just based on one study. Like research, it's built on replication and doing the same study again and again to find a strong result that we can rely on. But of course there's lack of funding in research and things like that even when you do a meta-analysis or systematic review, you'll read most meta-analyses and reviews will conclude we need more evidence to make a final decision because there's not enough studies done, well-conducted studies done with enough participants in a way that we're going to answer the role. And sometimes ethically we can't do well-conducted studies. Like, for instance, there's a lot of talk about the importance of like breastfeeding, but a lot of those studies that's based on isn't like RCTs, because you can't, which is a randomized control trial, which is the gold standard of a research study, and you can't randomly assign though people to say, okay, you're in the non-breastfeeding group, you're not allowed to breastfeed, whereas you're in the breastfeeding group, you're allowed to breastfeed. Then see if the babies in the breastfeeding group have a higher IQ when they're older. That would be a gold standard study to conduct, but ethically we can't do that because I think some have actually done that, but not. It's a bit unethical and difficult to execute or get the funding for. So we rely on less well structured studies where we just look at the general population and say, hey, you were breastfeed, what's your IQ? But then that has so many problems with research because there's other factors like the health of the mother, the income is a huge factor, the education levels of the mother and the family, what access to healthcare they have, and it's those factors that are probably causing the higher IQ or the lower incidences of chronic disease or whatever they find in these studies. But it's difficult to conduct a well-structured RCT. So I'm going off track a bit here, but
no, I love it. It's great. That's great.
It's We I guess to summarize, we want to work towards having a big body of evidence to then conduct a systematic review or meta-analysis to make a final decision. But even then, at that point, we don't always have the best underlying studies to even make the decision. So the research is a slow process, and we need to be aware of the limitations of the studies, but it's still better than no knowledge or no evidence. So it does tell us something, but we just have to be careful about how much weight we put to that and in the context of the different studies. There's things like drug trials that do huge randomized controlled trials where they assign people to receive a drug or a placebo and have really strong evidence that this drug helps reduce cholesterol, and that's pretty solid. You can't argue with that. So there's some areas where we do have really strong evidence that we can't deny, but there's other areas that the media like to report on and confuse us based on one study when the scientific process is slower than that.
So we shouldn't prop up our one idea or belief around a study, because what do we hear people? I've done the research, and there can pretty much always we could have an argument about anything, and I'm sure I could back up. I could find an article, probably a study that backs up my belief around that thing, and you can do yours. So how do we then progress to, as a society then? I understand it takes time. Like I can't even imagine trying to organize a trial group, and then it takes months and then years for these things, right?
Yeah. Well, starting from when you actually apply for funding to do the study, which often is a year out from starting the study, and then to build. Sometimes you've got to build the drug or the intervention, and then deliver it to participants in a randomized controlled trial, and then evaluate the outcomes, do statistical analysis, and write it up, and then report it. We'll see it published in a journal. That process, just from writing it to publication, can take 6 months or a year. You can sometimes be 5 years or 3 years down the track, depending.
You sort of touched on what I would call correlation and causation in that that's the layman's terms that I would use. To touch on something that you've sort of got a background in, to say that sunscreen causes cancer, as a statement, could we talk about how the problems with that, because that's something some people will believe.
Yes, sure. Yeah.
And then from my experience, which is, I'm talking to a researcher, so I'm the one with the with the here to learn.
Yeah.
But when people say things like that, could you break down from your perspective either why that's false, or I could give what I've been led to understand about that particular issue, and then you can tell me if I'm wrong?
Sure.
Would that be fine? So you could hear my...
I'm probably not going to be the expert in all these areas, but I can...
Only because you worked for the Cancer Council, I guess it would be relevant to you. What I've been... just as an example, because to me, it's, again, the correlation and causation for the sunscreen thing. It's just something that I've looked into.
Yeah.
I've done my own research.
Yeah, good, yeah.
And I found that although some of the... I'm cautious of some of the products, some of the ingredients that are in sunscreens.
Yeah, sure.
You can tell me whether I should be concerned about that or not. Yeah. Or you could say that's not my area of expertise.
Yeah.
To me, what I've been led to understand is that potentially it's not. It's that you can apply that and spend a really long time in the sun, like 6 or 7 hours, let's say, without getting burnt, and then that's what's giving you skin cancer because you're spending 6 or 7 hours in the sun.
Yeah.
Rather than it being, although we could be concerned about some of the ingredients in those particular products, it's the actual result of if you're spending that long in the sun, that's the problem.
Yes.
And you should just cover up rather than then just apply more sunscreen. Does that am I making sense there?
Yeah. So you're saying that the factor, so some studies might show the people that use more sunscreen are more likely to get cancer, but it's not the sunscreen ingredients that's causing cancer, it's the time, those people that wear more sunscreen are more likely to spend more time in the sun. Yeah,
I'm not really convinced that we should be spending with exposed mass exposure of skin to the sun more than like 1 hour or 2 hours maybe without, like that would seem unhealthy for our body.
Yeah.
And that sunscreen is just allowing us to do that.
Yeah.
And then, so by applying sunscreen, now I don't have to wear a long sleeve shirt. I can spend 7 hours in the sun without getting burned, but then that's actually still resulting in skin cancer because
sunscreen's not perfect. It doesn't stop all UV rays.
And then, maybe there's some other health effects from the ingredients of that, which is fair enough. But am I making sense there? So it's sort of rather than, I don't know. Is that a good way to think about it? I've kind of approached it, and people like to run around and say, sunscreen gives you cancer. And I'm like, well, actually, I don't know if it's the sunscreen. The sunscreen just allows you to be in the sun exposed for a longer period of time, which then gives you cancer.
That's interesting. I mean, the way I view those comments about sunscreen causing cancer is like, well, let's start with the evidence we do have, and we know that sun causes cancer, and the best way to cover up, the best way to stop sun cancer is to stay in the shade, wear a hat, wear long sleeve shirts and cover up. But when we can't do that, or on the areas that are still exposed like our hands, the next best is sunscreen. And so maybe there's some evidence that might appear that there's some chemicals, I doubt it, in sunscreen can cause cancer in some individuals. That people are claiming. I haven't seen any good evidence for that at all. But even if that does happen, well, it's one of the best ways that we have if we can't get shade and long sleeve shirts to protect ourselves against the sun, which we know and have very good evidence for causes cancer. So I'm putting my money on wearing sunscreen than not sunscreen. because of the weight of evidence showing how bad spending time in the sun is. But you're right that it's better to wear long sleeve shirt because it's going to be more effective than sunscreen at reducing UV rays. And it doesn't have chemicals, but I mean, I haven't seen any evidence to say that the chemicals are bad in myself.
I think we like to think of these outlandish statements as really, we like to hold on to them. So like breastfeeding your baby gives them a higher IQ.
Yeah, rubbish. Yeah,
and it's kind of like I think that we could look at whether or not breastfeeding gives better health outcomes to your child.
Yeah.
That's another. I feel like it's another discussion.
That's
it's
right,
not.
it
It's
is,
not this. We like to package it in. So, that's I guess just from some of the things that I see or hear from people. It's interesting to be like, oh, sunscreen gives you cancer. It's like, well, can we break that down? Like you said, let's look at what evidence we have, and then I guess the health effects of applying sunscreen to your body every day over a long period of time, with or without sun exposure, is a totally different discussion, right? Like people tend to be going like looking for living less toxic is the wrong word, but it's like we're living lives where they're less exposed to harmful, not even harmful, just more intense, unnatural things, I guess is what I'm trying to, synthetic type of things. So what I'm trying to do is break that down to say like, I guess that's another whole conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know. People like to hang on to these really super controversial statements sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
There's nuance to them, I feel like.
Yeah, and you touched on an important point, and it's like, well, what is the outcome we're speaking of? Like in the news, they'll say that alcohol is good for your health, or red wine is good for your health, and then later on they'll say, no, a red wine is bad for your health. But it comes down to like, what is the outcome we're looking at? And there are some studies that show, for example, that alcohol is like a red wine in particular is related to better like heart health, but it's a lot of the studies again are correlational, so it's not a randomized control trial. It's just people who drink red wine tend to be more well off and can afford better healthcare, or they eat healthier foods with red wine compared to a beer or not drinking a red wine. But also then if you switch the outcome and say, oh, well, what about the link of drinking red wine and cancer? And that sort of changes the story a bit. Like the people that drink more red wine are more likely to have certain types of cancer. I think bowel and breast, I think are the main ones. But so it's complicated, and it's not, the media like to sell a story like, yes, red wine is good for your heart health, but it's it is complicated, and it depends on your outcomes. If you're looking at heart health, you're looking at cancer, or what it is. Yeah.
Okay, so learn to ask better questions. Maybe that's what we should all learn to do.
Yeah. Like, is it based on a controlled trial, like a randomized controlled trial, or is it based on correlational data, which just looks at a whole bunch of people and asks them, do you drink red wine, and have you had a heart attack recently? And then there can be all these other variables that get in the way, like health. It's often money, income, and access to healthcare.
So interesting. And
what their other behaviours are. Like, who are these people who are drinking red wine? Like, they might be more well off, and they might eat healthier foods. I know when I'm at the pub having a palmy, like I feel like a beer, not a red wine. Whereas if I'm at home eating a salad and a bit of I feel it, then maybe a red wine.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yeah. Do you think that that's a bit of a problem with the way that we see the world? Okay, here's what is health? That's a better question. Is that a better question?
Yeah.
And you could define that if you wanted to, but I guess leading out of that, what is then we'll see a clip from 9 News and about this study and about this thing, and red wine's good for you.
Yeah.
But they're not required to put up like online. It seems to be easier sometimes to be able to people referencing the studies that they're linking to or something, and I always find that interesting. But the newspaper or the channel 9 News or 7 News or whatever, they don't put them up on screen usually.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah,
they'll reference the university maybe that it came out of, but it's it can be very vague and very. Do you think that's like how is that a problem to like we all just want to hear things that confirm our own biases?
Yeah, well, that's true. I mean, people don't always have or taking the information with a critical lens. It's often they'll see it at face value and take it as fact. Particularly, there's lots of good psychology research. So particularly if it aligns with their existing beliefs, it's just like confirmation bias. Oh, yep, that's my existing belief, and there's more evidence to back that up without thinking critically about that individual study or whether the media are properly reporting the outcomes or acknowledging the limitations of the trial or ignoring other studies done in the same area that might have different results, or a better study like a meta-analysis that combines all of it together. Yeah.
So what's your advice to people then? They hear something, they hear some crazy new claims about this, or like something to do with food or something to do with pharmaceutical drugs or something to do with whatever. Yeah. What do we do with that information?
Well, it's tough. You don't want to enroll in a PhD course to learn how to do research just to decide, your health choices. But, the first thing is to talk to our health practitioners, and you can ask the doctors who are trained in research as well and evidence-based practice. But if we're trying to find out some more information ourselves, we can try to link to the original study and just have a look to see first of all, is there multiple studies that the media are reporting, or is it just based on one recent study? We can look up other research done in that area through just Google Scholars, probably the easiest way. If you can't access something because it's behind a paywall, you could even email whoever wrote the study, and they'll email it to you for free. Like, their authors don't own it once it's published. But they'll have a copy that they can send you, and that's okay. Like, if there's an issue with paywall, and to see whether, it's hard because there's so many limitations that could go wrong. But I've mentioned a few key ones, like how many people in the sample. If it's a study done on 10 people, it's not as reliable as a study done on 300,000 people. And if it's a actual experiment where they assign people to one condition or another and compare, or if it's just a correlational survey that just asks people about two things and they try to correlate it, which doesn't show causation. I like the alcohol example.
Yeah, and I think so maybe just fostering an environment where people view things through more of a critical lens.
Yeah.
But balancing that, because it's so easy to become conspiratorial.
Yeah.
I feel like in that we go and seek out to prove why something's wrong, or we can take on, I don't know, like it's a really tricky balance that I've found through time, trying to understand different, social, cultural topics, but then trying to go and educate yourself on reading about them, questioning things in a healthy way of, I don't know, it's really hard.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I don't have all the answers, I'm afraid, but
no, that's fair enough. Yeah. I think it's interesting. How's your psychology? I could easily see you drinking red wine, retiring from whatever you're doing, and being, actually pursuing your clinical psychology degree.
I wonder if I'll do that one day. But I feel like if I did that, I'll probably end up back in research. Like, I'll be counselling for a few years and go, we don't have enough evidence about this. I'm going to go find it, or we need a better system, and I'm going to go research that. But people do research and clinical psych.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's so much there. I think. Is there anything else that you want to, I guess, that's important to you that you want to sort of touch on, or that you think I maybe misrepresented, or we didn't get to really go to the depth on? Is there anything that you feel like, no?
No. Yeah, you asked some good questions.
Okay. So I guess people, if they want to find out the answers, they can just talk to their health practitioner and just do some digging. Do a little bit of digging. I've found that you don't have to do that much to then go, oh, well, clearly that's saying this because this. Like, you can see why they've come to those conclusions or something like that.
Yeah.
It's such a big. Why do we like to just confirm our own biases? Why is it so easy to hear things and go, ha?
Yeah, I don't know why. I just know that it's a common in all of us. Like, we all do it, and we all think we don't do it, but we all do it. We all do take on evidence as truth if it matches with our underlying understanding about the topic, and ignore or think critically of of the others. You see it in politics, in health, in the news, and
It's hard to. I think the theme of this is like, are you hopeful?
Yes, yeah.
And it's hard to be hopeful sometimes when you find out something that you'd put your trust in ends up being false.
Absolutely, yeah.
Or was based on these things. Or maybe the issue was with me because I put my hope in something that had 2 studies.
Yeah.
And we should wait for 10. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it was propped up on sort of a weak argument or an untruth.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a fault of the consumer, but of the system as a whole. I mean, we need to do better as researchers to translate our research for the understanding of the general population. But then we also need better systems in like media, for example. And some media organisations are great. Like The Conversation gives health research information that's written by academics doing the research themselves, with the unbiased like focus. I mean, there's always bias in everything, but like not a media bias at least. So more options like that to go to for health information. And or I don't know if it'd be like rules around media or what it is, but it's I think it's a system problem. And also better training in like health professionals and making sure there's proper, strong evidence-based practice information, which sort of teaches health professionals how to apply research to their practice to make clinical decisions that are going to be best for their clients based on research, but also factoring shared patient decision-making. And we need to do really well at training our new health professionals in that as well, because a lot of people get their health information from health professionals, and for the most part they're a good trustworthy source, but we can still some further room for further improvement.
So there has to be a time for things to be tested, because we could sit there and say like the information age is just so fast, it's so quick, and so we can have something that we believe to be true, but then proving that with research is another whole thing, right? Like it's what's the time period of that on average, and then when does that get to the point where it's then being taught in a university or in a textbook or in schools, or GPs have that information in front of them, because GPs are general practice. They have to cover a lot of bases. So then sometimes you could they refer you to a specialist, or
they do have software to help them with evidence-based practice where they can find it's like a Dr. Google type, like where they can get the evidence-based sort of recommendations that match to their client, depending on their other medications and situation. So there are tools in general practice, but you want the health professionals themselves to understand, to be able to answer questions. And for the most part, I think we do pretty well, but there is some research showing there's certain areas that lack evidence-based practice. One example is back pain. Like physios and chiros often seem to be like overtreat rather than promote physical activity as being the better option to like keep moving, keep walking, keep going to your job, keep playing with your kids, even in a bit of pain's okay. That sort of often doesn't come through well enough through the health practitioners, but generally it's good.
I want to get an indication of time. I know it's hard, but could you give a range of time, like in terms of actually and not just one study, but then time in like multiple studies, and then like I said, bringing that through to like when that information can be handed out to the public as like.
Yeah, it's tough because it depends on, like for some, there's lots of areas, like for example, I was talking about like drug trials where it's quite clear evidence that this drug is effective and it's improving, reducing risk of heart attack by like 5 well-controlled trials, that then that information can get into practice and start and then they have, of course, like the safety data when they roll it out to a few more people, and then they can get that information and roll it out to practice. Might be quicker than some areas where the studies are difficult to conduct well because of ethical reasons or whatever, or they don't have clear clear outcomes, or the outcomes of the different studies are quite diverse, can take longer because then you need more data. But I mean, I've heard the people talk about the 7 years that it takes from research to enter into practice. And I think that is based on a study, and I don't know how well it was conducted, and I don't know exactly what area of practice they were referring to, whether it was health or government policies or GPs or what exactly. But I have heard of that mentioned a few times, that it takes 7 years for research to actually be translated into improved practice in the real world.
Is that hard because of how quickly things change?
Yeah, absolutely. And working in the technology space with our digital physical activity interventions, it's hard because we're trying to create these interventions and deliver them and evaluate them to see if they're effective. But the technology, by the time you get the data and go to improve it, then the technology's changed so much that you've got to kind of re-overhaul. But I mean, there's still lots of innovation happening in the research space. Our research group, led by my supervisor, is creating a physical activity chatbot that's using like machine learning data to like hyper tailor the content that's given to participants, both the content as well as the timing and the frequency of like physical activity messages and nudges. And that's pretty like using cutting edge data. It uses ChatGPT to build the conversations and things like that. So we're not too behind the eight ball, but but by the time those results come out, hopefully it could be quite a few years from now. Hopefully it won't be old news. We'll see. Yeah.
It's so hard to speed that up without compromising the quality of your data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you could say, oh, those things need to move more quickly, but it's like we have to work out a way to conduct research in a meaningful way without compromising data.
Quicker, yeah.
Yeah, quicker. That's hard.
Sometimes it kind of like if you have more funding, you can recruit participants quicker and get through those trials quicker. But that's not always possible in research. Yeah.
It's really fascinating. So are you hopeful?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful, like speaking of research, like in this industry, there's so much great innovation and some great minds of people, some colleagues that I work with that are really thinking about how to improve the options we have available for healthcare and systems and some positive collaborations with industry. So, and I'm lucky to be part of that. So I would say I am hopeful. Yeah.
It's an interesting question because I think it doesn't mean things aren't, you're faced with, you're trying to solve problems.
Yeah.
So you're trying to see beyond the problem and find a positive outcome for people's lives or for health outcomes or lifespan or quality of life. So it's some days if I asked you, are you hopeful? You'd say, not today. This thing just went wrong or this.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's definitely a lot of setbacks, and it's in research, a lot of the grant funding programs that aren't industry, like the government, the success rate is around 10%. So that means for every 10 grants you apply for, because these are all well-qualified researchers applying for these grants, so it means that every 10 grants you apply for, you only get one. So you get a lot of just failed attempts to get funding, and that can be tough. And it can be tough when it's hard, like you're struggling to recruit enough participants. People get sick of surveys and or don't have time to participate in a trial, or you don't have enough funding to give them proper compensation to participate, or too much compensation can be unethical as well. So it's like there's some challenges in research, and then also that waiting to see. It doesn't mean that just because you find something, there's instant policy changes or you make the world a better place instantly. As we spoke about, it's a slow process. You've got to add your findings to that of the greater body of work before we then go and make any policy changes. And to get that information, though, in the hands of the right people that can make policy changes or healthcare decision changes and things like that.
It's very interesting. I feel like I've learnt a lot about that process.
Yeah, and I hope I haven't focused too much on the negative. It's just that because the research is the best system we have to find out the truth about the world, to hold biases and confounding factors constant, so we can really find what does this effect does this intervention or drug have on the individual. And it's the best system we have. Like it's I'm always constantly surprised when I set out to do a study and I have a hypothesis of what's going to happen, and then the data shows me otherwise, and it's like a way of finding the truth about really how this affects this drug affects or this intervention affects people. And so it's great space to work in, and I think it's important and important part of society, even if it's slow and has its people have to be aware of the limitations as well.
Let's go back to our comment about BMI.
Yeah,
it's like it can be. It's not ideal, but it's all we have.
Yeah,
that's probably
Yeah,
but that's not put very well. But it's the thought that we've just got to work with what we've got.
Yeah.
And keep on going, and hopefully things can improve.
Yeah.
In the system of.
And a lot of studies do, like they'll have participants, if their main goal is weight loss, those type of studies will get people to come into the lab and do proper measurements and blood tests and all of that. And that's happening, just not in if you're doing like a research survey online, trying to look at correlates of or factors that are related to like loneliness or something, and you want to see if people are lonely and will have a higher BMI, and you do an online survey, often BMI would just be used. But if it's a trial that's looking at a drug or like an intense weight loss sort of thing, they'll do proper laboratory measures. So it depends on how important it is for the study as to whether BMI is used or not, and what other options are available.
So then the research you're doing right now, when is that set to conclude? And where's that stage at for you?
Yeah, I'm currently funded by the Heart Foundation. They're funding me a research fellowship to do research in promoting physical activity in older adults. And I touched on a program I'm running now, which was actually launched today, where I'm collaborating with the 10,000 Steps program, and they have a lot of industry and organisations and corporate organisations do their team tournaments, but there's not heaps of community groups of like older adults who participate, and so it's mainly just workplaces, and so that have like a paid person that's to promote social and activities in the workplace. So I'm excited to see whether we can roll out a team challenge within older adult community groups to target that population group that is often missed in the current setup, but have a lot to health gains to make. And walking's perfect for that population group because you can start small and build up. And even if you can't walk, you can do a different type of activity and convert it to steps. So it's really inclusive for that population group as well. So I'm excited to see how that goes. And I'm really interested in how the social support of those team challenges impacts the outcome. So the people that feel more socially connected to their team, do they have better outcomes? Do they improve their behaviour more than those that don't?
Can see a psychology.
Yeah, I'm weaving that in.
You're weaving that in behind it.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, that's really cool. Well, that's launched today. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's congratulations, and
thanks.
It'll be cool to see what the outcomes of that are.
Yeah.
And we're just working towards hopefully understanding or existing in a healthier, better world.
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, so cool. Oh man, I have so many other questions I want to ask you. Like, what are the main limitations? What are the main we'll wrap this up shortly, but
Yeah.
what are the main things stopping people living healthy lives?
Well, I mean, the world, I think some people think it's like a motivation, but it's not. The world's set up for us to fail. Like, we know that when councils, they put more like footpaths in, for example, that increases physical activity. And we know when people have better access to healthier food choices, when they're more affordable than junk food, then people make those choices. So I see a lot of barriers to people leading healthy lifestyles when in our current world, when we're set up to fail, when there's not enough options for people to to walk to places like in regional Australia. It can be difficult to be active travel compared to say in Europe when it's all built to walk places, and then also the technology and those distractors in life make it very hard for people to change their behaviour. And I think we need like a multi-level approach. Like I'm a specialist in behaviour change, individual behaviour change motivation to get people to improve their health behaviours. But it's very difficult to do that if we don't have systems and structures in place to help whether it be like lots of footpaths or access to community physical activity programs for low-income people, or whether it's better ways of controlling technology use, or workplaces seeing that as important and giving activity breaks or whatever, instead of smoko breaks, so you have an activity break, or or walking meetings and have that as part of the culture. I think it comes partly from the individual, but also the society as well, and that multi-level approach is important, but
obviously
always happen.
yeah. Obviously, you're very focused on like system change.
Yeah,
but I don't know. I think maybe I'm too strong on people taking responsibility for their own lives as well.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do. You can't just sit there and say like, why are people unhealthy? Well, because they need to, because they should do, like, you're looking to the deeper causations of those things. But I guess I'm very pro people taking personal responsibility for their circumstances, and it's very easy to blame your doctor or the government or your council for like why you could have these things when would it be like rude to just say some people are lazy? Like, I mean, parking, for example, you go to Brisbane or a major city and you like walk for hours, but locally people just pull up, like get angry because they can't park within 10 meters of the shop they want to go to. There's a rubbish truck emptying things outside. That should be fine. But it's like, what, like from a psychological point of view, that's so strange to me because I don't know.
Yeah, I see what you mean. And as I said, like my job is individual motivation. We deliver programs that, based on behaviour change principles, help people to change their habits, to lead healthier lifestyles. But working in that space, you see people revert back to the culture and revert back to what opportunities they have, because it's hard to sustain, like that motivation can wane, and then it's hard to sustain that and make long-term behaviour changes. But it is possible when people do it. So you do have a point that you can't blame all the external when people can make those individual changes. I guess I'm thinking from a population health perspective is that we know that just telling people to exercise doesn't work, because we've been telling people to exercise for a long time and they're not doing it. So there's got to be other, and most people say they want to increase their activity, but they're not doing it. So there's other factors at play as well.
Yeah, or I guess just giving people the tools to understand the realities of the outcomes of their diet or whatever those things are.
Yeah, and that's what our interventions try to do. Gently is explain, like, look, there is an increased risk of cancer, diabetes, and why working in the older adult space, physical activity is amazingly helpful for cognition. So reducing cognitive decline amongst the older adult population, it's amazingly helpful for that. And so we try to do that education as well as that behaviour change support. But it is a challenge to keep that sustained behaviour change.
Yeah, it's so fascinating to me. I think, maybe I'm just too tough on people.
But then it's complicated, because sometimes people, like we tell people that are struggling with mental health disorders, we know that, like depression and anxiety, we know that physical activity helps, and GPs will often tell them, well, go out and be active. But for some people, they can't even get out of bed. So it's like you got to meet people where they're at too, and it's a challenge, and it's got to be really tailored to individual circumstances. And
is that a systemic thing as well, where it's systemic? I don't really like, but in terms of how do we, for a doctor, I feel bad sometimes for a GP who's trying to help someone live a better life.
Oh yeah.
And they've got a 15-minute consult to try and solve all this person's problems.
Yeah.
And is that it's you can tell that person exercise and it doesn't mean they will, but you can write a script for a medication that lowers their blood pressure.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm not blaming health professionals for these outcomes, but it's like we've got a society that
wants a quick fix.
I'm putting the blame on individuals where it's like they just want to take the pill, a pill, or do this thing, or snap their fingers, or find the magic potion that solves all their problems without actually doing the work. I don't know.
Yeah, like that's part of it. But you touched on the lack of time of GPs, and that's important. I think because if people actually had longer conversations with their GPs who checked in with how they're going with their physical activity regularly and things like that, that would help. And I think some people would listen to that, but there's no time. And so that's why we do our digital health programs to fill that gap. But then it's people, where they have to find us, and we have to, scale it up effectively, and people don't have time, and there's barriers in that as well. Wish I had an answer, but
no, I just think
we can.
I just like thinking about those things.
Yeah.
And is it because people maybe are leaving to look at? You touched on earlier certain industries potentially treating the symptom instead of the root cause.
Yeah.
So are people going to their GP too late? People go to the dentist too late. Like we're looking for those early intervention type of things where people don't go and seek out a professional until there's real problems. It could be in a mental health sort of factor, or it could be in a physical health capacity.
Yeah.
We're leaving those things go too far, and then it's harder then to, and there's more problems that are, you've got high blood pressure and you're tired and you've got mental health issues that come out of that, but that's all stems from your, being overweight, or I don't know. Do you not you understand what I mean? It's sort of like, are we?
Yeah. Do we need to intervene earlier and have healthy lifestyles part of our culture, and that's going to lead to reduced chronic illness. By the time they come to the GP for diabetes, it's not too late, but it's too late to prevent diabetes at least. But I know, and I mean that's why I work in this space, is just trying to we do try to intervene early, and I focus on older adults that are younger older adults in my research, like around 65 to 75, and that's at the point at which they're often retiring, and we try to help to establish healthy habits within retirement that they continue on, and then that's going to lead to lower risk of falls, improved cognition, less hospitalisation, longer times being independent, improved mobility to carry the groceries without support. It just has so much potential, that physical activity, if we can intervene early at retirement. You call that early when you're focusing on older adults, and I think that's so important. But there are so many barriers, and things like mental health problems can crop up, and it's hard to keep active. It's a health problem can crop up, like even just the flu or something, and that can mess up with your healthy habits. And there's those things at life that happens that is challenging.
Well, good on you for leading actual change. That's great. Here I am just telling people, being an old grumpy man, and just being like, take personal responsibility for your problems. You're really leading a charge in making people's lives better over time. It's really cool. It's really cool to see, and I think it's important to hear about, because we don't always know what's going on behind the scenes, and people like you have dedicated your career to this type of thing, and it's very admirable, and very it's very great to see good, smart, young people trying to make real change in the world. I think I really want to encourage people who are making those things. So good on you.
Yeah. Thanks, Levi. Thanks for having a chat today.
That's so cool. It's so cool. I'll have to come up with some more questions, and we can, in a year, check in and see how things are going, or I don't know, like what's happening down the track, and how the trials or how the research is progressing, or
absolutely,
and what in your hypothesis has changed, or I don't know. It'll be very interesting to see, what unfolds with it. So, thanks for making my grandparents healthier.
As I said, I try.
It's so cool. What should people do? Where can people, I guess, are you, do you have an opinion piece you put out every week, or, write into the local paper, or is there anything that people can do to, or should subscribe to, in regards to getting, this information as it's created, or, think critically about their lives and talk to their GP?
Yeah. I mean, there's programs that come and go. There's some, the government website has information on how much, when we're talking about older adults, it's got how much activity you should be doing and the different types, including strength and balance.
So what are some of those things that people should be doing?
There's the main recommendation is 30 minutes of physical activity on most days of the week, so 5. And that's looking at moderate activity. So when you start to breathe a bit harder, and you can feel yourself warming up after about 10 minutes, but you're not flat out puff and pant and can't talk type goal. And so 30 minutes of that type of activity, like a brisk walk most days, is the main activity that is recommended for both the general adult population as well as older adults. But then specifically for older adults, they also talk about the importance of doing some balance training, which is what will down the track help reduce risk of falls. And that can be done through a class like Tai Chi or something, or you can do some balance exercises at home, which you could find balance, like standing on one foot, those sort of exercises online, and some flexibility like stretching. And also strength training. And I think strength training's overlooked, the benefits of that. Or sometimes older adults think, that's for the young'uns that go to CrossFit. But strength training has important benefits on top of your moderate intensity walking that include mental health benefits and cognition and reduced risk of chronic illness on top of that moderate intensity physical activity. So that's... Yeah, there's not to overlook strength. I think sometimes people overlook some strength training. Walking includes a little bit of strength, particularly if you want to put bricks in your backpack and try to walk up a hill or something, that's strength. It doesn't have to be, weights at a gym, but just some type of exercises. Yeah.
Okay.
30
minutes of elevated heart rate every day, 5 days a week.
Yeah.
All right. So everyone here listening can go and listen to their favorite audiobook or a podcast or...
Yeah.
Go walking with a friend instead of sitting down and having coffee.
Absolutely, yep.
It's pretty practical.
Yeah. Make a booking with a friend, and they'll help keep you accountable. Or if not, do something you enjoy or are being active, like listening to a podcast.
Have a walking buddy.
The same time each day helps build a habit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Are you going to make me next time you come on the podcast? We're going to have to walk. We'll have to do this walking.
Yeah, we'll do a walking podcast. Let's do it.
That would be interesting. Have some cameraman running behind, having to do the whole thing. Oh, cool. Well, thanks so much for coming on today. I really appreciate you making the time out of your busy schedule.
Yep.
And it's great to hear about it. Looking forward to a bright future of research and hopefully lots of funding. Studies and things, because it's important work. So if people have an opportunity to discuss that with their local, where does funding mostly come from? Local, federal, state governments?
Federal government have funding schemes for universities, yeah.
So we should be petitioning our federal members in Parliament to push for...
Yeah, more research.
More research funding.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's important to know what the outcomes are.
Yeah.
What the policies that they're supporting and everything like that.
There's the Australian Research Council and the National Health and Medical Research Council that are the government organisations that fund research, or the government departments, I should say, that fund research. Yeah.
When we're looking at policies of people we want to vote into government, I think we should think about these things. Yeah. What are they supporting? Are they going to?
Well, us researchers do, but I don't know how. Yeah.
Well, I think everyone should, if they're concerned with these outcomes and want better, things focused and studied, then we should support that. So it's good.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. I think it's been very practical.
Yeah.
I'm going to go for a walk.
Sounds good. Thanks, Levi.